In today's video, we're going to continue our 2019 off-season plan series, and today's team we're covering is the Buffalo Sabres, and that's coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So today's team we're covering in the 2019 NHL offseason planning series is the Buffalo Sabres. We're a little bit over halfway through this series. If there's other teams you'd like to see, there's a playlist up here in the YouTube cards you can check out to see the other teams you've already covered in this series. And if the team you're looking for has not been covered as of yet, don't worry, it's coming soon. Over the next coming days and weeks here, we are going to ramp up the series and get all 31 teams covered with their own dedicated video. Now also, if you're new to this series, we break this down into 3 segments. Segment 1, we do an 18-19 season recap, take a look at some key team and player statistics, as well as any significant changes that happened to the team throughout the year. Secondly, we're going to take a look at the overall salary cap situation, any pending UFAs, RFAs, or any contracts they need to look after this summer. And then thirdly, we're going to take a look at any moves in trades, free agency, anything that we feel like they should do during the offseason here to get better and more competitive for next year. Now let's jump in here. Segment 1 with an 18-19 season recap. So as you can see, the Buffalo Sabres had a record of 33, 39, and 10 for 76 points, ended up finishing in 6th place in the Atlantic Division. Early on in the year, though, things certainly looked like they were going to have a much different fate. They had a very extended winning streak early on. Things were looking pretty solid, but then things really come crashing down, and the second half of the year was not strong at all for the Buffalo Sabres. Now let's take a look here at the overall team statistics for power play, penalty kill, goals for, and against. The power play and penalty kill special teams this year actually were not too bad. The power play was at 19.5% this year for 16th best in the NHL, so right around the middle of the pack, so overall not too shabby. The PK, again, pretty respectable at 80.9% for 12th best, so special teams certainly was not the problem here. Overall goals for, though, were not fantastic. 226 goals for 24th best in the NHL, and goals against were 271 for 23rd best, so overall not great either. Obviously the 5-on-5 play was more of their detriment, as the special teams seem to be doing relatively well. Now let's take a look at some key player performances, including their goaltenders and some top scorers for the team. Free agent acquisition from last summer, Carter Hutton ended up being the starting goaltender for the bulk of the year with a record of 18, 25, and 5. He finished with a 3.0 goals against average and a 908 save percentage. Obviously a little bit subpar here. Not great results by Carter Hutton, the career backup who had put up some stellar backup numbers with the St. Louis Blues over the past couple years. Was a fairly highly sought after free agent goaltender in last year's offseason, signed with the Sabres. Basically as a short-term stopgap solution here between him and Linus Ullmark. They will certainly make up a pretty decent tandem, at least you would think they would on paper. Ullmark appears to be the goalie of the future, plus they also have Ukko-Pekka Laukkonen coming up on the way through the junior ranks as well, who looks like a pretty solid goalie. So they signed Hutton to a shorter-term contract to have a veteran back there, and he did an okay job, but certainly not quite as good as he's seen in the past, but also different team in front of him makes a big difference as well. Taking a look at their top scorers, they were led by newly appointed captain Jack Eichel, who put up 82 points. Eichel averaged over a point per game, so a solid year for Jack Eichel. Saw Sam Reinhart in the first year of a new deal for him as well, put up 65 points. The newly acquired Jeff Skinner had a phenomenal season, scoring 40 goals and 63 points. He seemed to be a great match with Jack Eichel. Skinner absolutely tore it up, although he was very streaky like he has been at other years in his career as well. There were certainly days and weeks where he was putting in goals in bunches, and then there was weeks at a time where he was kind of quiet too. So 40 goals overall the whole season, you have to be happy with that. And of course, we saw the number 1 overall pick in last year's draft, youngster Rasmus Dahlin, have a pretty solid rookie season. He does look like he went number 1 overall for a reason. Looks like he's got a ton of potential. He's a finalist for Rookie of the Year, putting up 44 points. So Dahlin certainly had a pretty solid rookie season and looks to be a huge part of that team's future. Now, I guess the other good news here is all these other players we mentioned in the top scorers are all relatively young as well, and they certainly have bright futures ahead. This team did go through some changes through the year in regards to his personnel, but nothing too significant. They did end up losing Patrick Berglund, who ended up being terminated. Of course, Berglund came over in that big big trade last summer with the Blues for the Ryan O'Reilly deal. Things were just not working out. I guess he had some other stuff going on. Left the team and eventually was terminated. So Berglund was a bit of a bust after coming over in that deal. We did see a trade later into the season where the Sabres acquired Brandon Montour, pretty good defenseman from the Anaheim Ducks, in exchange for Brendan Gooley. So obviously that deal's worked out pretty good. I think Montour will be a pretty good part of their top 4D moving forward. And of course, after the year ended, they did decide to fire head coach Phil Housley after his second season behind the bench and are going here in a new direction. Of course, the newly appointed head coach, Ralph Kruger, we'll get into talking about him later in the video, but of course, he is now the new head coach that was just recently announced here by Jason Botterill. Now let's take a look here at the second segment where we look at their cap situation and overall contract situation. So let's get started here with the list of UFAs and RFAs. Now, as you can see, the UFA list is not very long. Some key decisions to be made, though. Obviously, Jeff Skinner is by far one of the bigger decisions they need to make this year. The 40-goal scorer is a UFA, has not yet signed an extension with the club. And, of course, longtime veteran Jason Pominville, also a UFA this year. It's not quite clear yet if he intends to keep playing and if the Sabres would be interested. I would say more than likely he's played his final game as a Sabre, but you just never know. It's hard to say if he'll emerge next year continuing to play or what exactly the road will hold here for Pominville, so I guess that will be determined. On the RFA side, they do have some guys that need to be looked after, but nothing too crazy. Backup goaltender Linus Ullmark needs a new contract. I don't imagine they'll have any difficulty getting that done. Defenseman Jake McCabe's an RFA. Then they have a trio of forwards, including Gergensons, Larson, and Rodriguez. So I would imagine, for the most part, that they'll qualify and retain their restricted free agents. I don't imagine they're going to want to not qualify any of these guys and keep them around in some capacity here. So overall, they don't have anything too significant on the RFA front. The main contract they need to get done here is Jeff Skinner. Obviously, Ullmark's probably the most important, you could argue, amongst the RFAs, but really Jeff Skinner, whether or not they retain him, is going to be a big part of this team moving forward. Now let's take a look at the overall cap situation that this team has lined up for next year. The Sabres have a total of 15 NHL contracts in place for next season right now, for a total of $53.5 million in total value, leaving them with a cap space of $29.4. Considering what they have to look after, that leaves them a lot of flexibility to either add to free agency, make other trades. They can certainly take on more salary and make some other moves here if they decide to go down that road. So they have lots of flexibility that way. So when it comes to the salary cap, they are in excellent shape. Now let's move over to segment 3, where I'll give you my thoughts and opinions on what changes this team needs to make to get better for next year. Now, is it just me, or does it feel like the Buffalo Sabres have been going through a rebuild forever? It's been a long time since this team's been in the playoffs. It's been a long time since this team has even finished up higher in the standings than come close. Things were looking much more promising early in the 18-19 season, but it was not meant to be. Obviously, that long winning streak, they could not keep it up. They were certainly playing a little bit beyond what they were capable of for a long stretch there. It was fun to watch, but obviously when things kind of came back crashing down to normal, they kind of leveled out, and we saw the old Buffalo Sabres emerge, unfortunately. So it's really important this year for Buffalo to continue making some progress. Obviously, they got out of the basement of the league, which is great, but they still have a long ways to go to get into the playoffs. They're in a pretty tough division against some other teams that you already know without even looking ahead that are going to be strong, like Tampa and Boston and Toronto. You know those are going to be tough teams. Teams like Montreal just barely missed last year. They're certainly going to be expected to be as good or better next year as well. So they're in tough to even get into a playoff spot before we even start the offseason here. So they certainly have to make sure that they take the right steps to move this team in the right direction, or GM Jason Botterill might be in tough looking for a new job here in another year or so as well. In my opinion, the most paramount thing this team needs to do is retain Jeff Skinner. He's still pretty young. He's only 27 years old. Yes, he's had some health problems in the past, but for a guy like him, I would not have any issues going on a longer-term deal. He's young enough. He's scoring at a high rate. If you think about it, if you give him a 7 or 8 year deal, he's only looking at being 34 or 35 years old. It's not like he's going to be into his late 30s. He's been able to stay healthy more recently here. He's still putting up lots of goals. Very important. I would try my best to get him locked up. If he walks, thankfully they didn't give up much of anything to get him, so it's not like they're going to be set back too much from that perspective. But the fact that they have a 40-goal scorer in their lineup to suddenly be missing that when they already were not scoring enough goals to be in the upper half of the league would be a major letdown and move this team backwards. If you take a look at the free agent market, there's certainly lots of guys they could look to sign, but based on who's out there and where they're expected to go, I'm not sure that the Sabres can be a big player when it comes to a lot of the bigger names. If you take a look around, like your Artemi Panarins and your Matt Duchene's, your Erik Karlsson, it's not likely that they're going to be a player in signing any of those big name players. Not that they necessarily need to be. There's still plenty of other guys in that middle tier that could certainly help satisfy a lot of the team's problems. But one thing I would certainly look to would be a number 2 center iceman. Certainly youngster Casey Mittelstadt didn't have the greatest year last year. He's still learning. He's still young. Certainly no means to be frustrated or be given up for sure. But certainly, like I mentioned in another video with another team in a similar boat here, they probably should get another solid number 2 center, which takes the pressure off Mittelstadt, gets him a different assignment. It gives the Sabres the option to match up Mittelstadt against some players on the other opposing team, lower in the lineup, some third pair D more often to get him some better looks, to get him really developing his skills here and take that pressure off. Maybe a guy like a Kevin Hayes, for example, not to say that he's linked to the Sabres, but he's that type of player that I'd be looking to. Somebody who's not going to cost too much, but can really solidify that second line. One player I'd be looking to move off the roster, if at all possible, via trade, and if that's not going to work out, I would consider a buyout would be Vladimir Sobotka, who was the other piece that came over from the Blues. That trade for Ryan O'Reilly did not really work out overly well, in my opinion, on the Buffalo side at least. Obviously the Blues are loving the fact they have O'Reilly in their lineup, but overall getting Berglund and Sobotka and then either of those guys not working out. I realize there were some other pieces, but that's a couple pieces on this roster that's not worked out so far. I would attempt to move him off the roster if possible, and if not, I would consider a buyout. He's only got 1 year left, and it would not be overly expensive to take a look at that option. Of course, with the 2019 NHL Draft, they're drafting number 7 overall, so once again, the Sabres have a fairly high draft pick. They should be able to add themselves another solid young player in that regard. Of course, last year they had the number 1 overall pick, grabbed Rasmus Dahlin, which obviously is going to be a huge part of the team's future. So obviously it's hard to say what road they go down. More than likely this year, I think they would be primed to take a forward based on the defense in the draft. You're looking at Bowen Byram being the top defenseman picked, likely going to go around the number 3, number 4 range. The other defensemen that are in the draft expected to go higher up probably will go beyond 7. So if they're in a situation taking the best player available, they probably grab themselves a pretty decent forward. They could look to a guy like a Kirby Dach or a Peyton Krebs or a Dylan Cousins, or maybe the Russian Vasily Podkolzin might still be available. The Sabres may not want to be patient enough, though, to take him. Obviously, anybody who takes him is going to be waiting a year or two to get him into their lineup, and the Sabres might not want to go down that road. They might want to look after one of these other guys who might be able to get into the lineup a little bit quicker. But regardless, whoever you take at number 7, more than likely, pretty good chance, probably at least in my opinion, that they don't play immediately. They probably have at least 1 more year out before they make the jump to the NHL. But either way, they're going to grab themselves another prospect and probably going to be another potentially elite forward. Now, like I mentioned as well, they have a new head coach in Ralph Krueger. Certainly an interesting, unconventional hire, I think it's fair to say. Ralph Krueger certainly has been out of the NHL for about 5 years. Krueger's been an executive for Southampton over in the Premier League over in the UK, so obviously he's been away from not only from the NHL but away from the sport entirely. I realize that doesn't mean that he's certainly not watching things closely and whatnot, but still an unconventional hire. I mean, he obviously previously had a stint with the Edmonton Oilers. He was first an associate coach there and then a head coach. The head coaching tenure did not last overly long, and I know many feel that he was unjustly let go and that it might have been a big mistake by the Oilers in the past here. But he is somebody who has a lot of international experience. Krueger comes with a major international flavor. Like I said, he's been working over in the Premier League overseas. He's coached in the World Cup. He's coached in the Olympics. He's coached in the World Championships. So he's certainly helped coach many different teams in many parts of the world. So from that aspect, when you take a look at the Sabres roster, they do have a bit of an international flavor there as well. So from that perspective, he hopefully will be able to fit in and relate to a lot of different players from various parts of the hockey world for sure. There is a connection as well between Krueger and the Botterill family. They've known each other a long time. So obviously Jason Botterill knows a lot what he's capable of and what he would be like behind the bench and how to handle his team. So I do expect them to work together relatively well. But at the same time, you can't help but wonder if this could be a great move or could this be a massive mistake. There's certainly lots of other interesting coaching candidates that are on the market. Not necessarily that they'd have to go into the well and take somebody like an Alain Vigneault or Joel Quenneville. Although it was reported that Todd McClellan was in the mix for that job with the Sabres before he ended up taking the job with the LA Kings. So obviously they were considering many different options, including Ralph Krueger, who ultimately landed the job here with the Buffalo Sabres. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comment section. What do you think of new Sabres coach Ralph Krueger, and do you think he will be a good fit here with the Sabres? So when you combine the fact that they get a brand new coach, they're going to have another high pick in the draft this year. They could make some noise in free agency. They could retain a 40-goal scorer, but there's lots of questions that need to be answered for this Sabres team. Can they ever get out of this rebuild and become a steady, stable franchise that are a consistent, competitive team, always having a shot at the playoffs? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section, and we can continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans who enjoy. So if you're new, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.